Okay, welcome everyone to Port Alberni, Char's Landing. We got a big crowd in the house. Welcome. Yay. And welcome to our online Zoomers. Yay. I'm a little confused today. I'm Char. And welcome to my home. And I'm a little confused because Karl's not here tonight, the moderator, and he's off to the Bulldogs game, our local hockey game, and rah, rah, rah. But we can give him a rough time next month, okay? But anyways, I want to welcome everyone. And we have our stand-in MC, Kathlleen Vance. We see her online there. Wave, Kathlleen.
Yes.
Yay! And she's standing in for Karl. So I'll take a vote afterwards and see how she did. Karl,
Right.
see if Karl gets to keep his job or not.
No pressure.
Anyhow, thank you all for coming. Thank you for driving through the snow. I guess it melted today, but we had big snow last night in Port Alberni. So thank you everyone for getting out here. And I invite you to have a wonderful night.
Okay, my vote's for Karl, by the way. Electric Mermaid Emcee, Derek Hanebury, is a Port Alberni writer of poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction. He's taught writing here at North Island College for many years, and his latest book is Something Else Altogether, and it's now out, so go buy it.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you very much. And yeah, you did great. I don't know, Karl should be worried. I don't know. Yeah, look out. Anyway, welcome everyone. As Char said, was a snowy night last night, but a lot better today with some rain, and we've got a good house here at Char's, and let's just start by giving a big round of applause to Char, who is just running herself ragged here, getting this thing going tonight. And we're so grateful to have her here in Port Alberni and have Char's Landing on the unceded territory of the Pacheseth and Sishat First Nations. We're grateful to their ancestors and to them for sharing their land with us. And we've got a good slate of readers again tonight. I'm really looking forward to hearing, especially our feature, Perry Bulwer, who's going to share with us a good portion out of his memoir about spending over 20 years in a religious cult, the Children of God. And I went to his book launch at Mobius Books here, and I thought, yeah, we got to get this guy out to the Electric Mermaid, and he was gracious enough to agree to it. So he's here live in Char's Landing tonight with us. So we'll have a couple of open micers to start, and then we'll give Perry the podium for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up for some questions and answers, and I'm sure there's going to be lots just in terms of the subject matter that he's been writing about. So, and I'm reading his book right now, and it is fascinating, and I think you'll agree when you hear what he has to say. So let's not waste any time. We're going to get right down to things, and we're going to have a live reader here at Port Alberni open us up with Robert Gunn. Robert, if you want to come on up to the podium here, and Kyle will get that mic adjusted. Thank you, Kyle. And then
start off with a bit of a depressing one tonight. Hard Rain was sung by Patti Smith when she accepted Bob Dylan's Nobel Prize on his behalf. Earlier, Dylan had commented that many of the lines in this classic song could be a subject of a song on their own. And this is one such. I went back to Lord Randall, the original poem, and the call and response. So I'm calling this Lord Randall's Tale. Lord Randall, my well-travelled pa. Lord Randall, my dear papa, where have you been so far? I've been out on new barren deserts and old lifeless forests, down into dark oceans and onto the side of dry mountains. I've been to lands where the folks are all vagrants. I've been to rich palaces with pure gold fountains. Lord Randall, you blind old man, what did you see there, Lord Randall, my dear man? I saw endless talk and reports and pontification. I saw glaciers melting and whole islands submerged. I saw great seas dying with acidification. I saw the anguish of children, their voices unheard. Lord Randall, you deaf old man, what did you hear, Lord Randall, my dad? I heard the moaning of whales starving and coral reefs dying. I heard wise women called Cassandras, their warnings ignored. I heard the captured and conceited continue their lying. I heard the laughter of privileged, their pockets engorged. Lord Randall, you diplomatic old man, who did you meet, Lord Randall, my dad? I met those on thrones acting with total impunity. I met tyrants and dictators, their bank accounts swollen. I met leaders captured by industry and peaceful continuity. I met angry youth, their very futures all stolen. Lord Randall, you useless old man, what did you do, Lord Randall, my dearest papa? I came home to find that truth leads to no action, and the rush of time is no real cause for alarm. I came home in total despair with their targets and fiction, with the complete understanding that we'll do ourselves harm. The coda of this is hard times, hard times, hard times here now for millions, hard times down the track for us all. So this is the third part of Riverbend. Last month we left it that the two nations were living quietly on their bend of the river. And this is part 3 with the subtitle, Great Nations of Europe Coming Through, to use a phrase from the great Randy Newman. When we left Riverbend last month, there were 2 nations living, we presume, quietly on the river. Meanwhile, great events had been brewing out of sight, but I'm sure not out of knowledge of the locals. Since the late 1700s, exploitation of the sea otter for fur to trim the robes of wealthy Chinese had resulted in multiple trading patterns with multiple dubious participants involving Boston, London, the Pacific coast of North America, China, and back to Europe, with various goods, weapons, cotton, opium, and other trinkets for different legs of the long voyages. Later, this became seal hunting using First Nations crew, smuggling, slave trading, gun running, and intertribal conflict were some of the byblows of this lawless time. Spain was expanding into California and exploring north. The Russians had claims to the south from their lands in Alaska, while America was full of go west young man mode, and English companies were exploiting furs and First Nations wherever they could find them. As early as 1804, the Russians and the Tlingit had battles involving forts and cannons on both sides. America and Russia signed a treaty in 1827 that determined their boundaries on the coast, and in 1867, Russia sold the whole caboodle of Alaska to America, 600,000 square miles at a total cost of 2 cents an acre, or $7.2 million in the day. The beginning of US infatuation with real estate, no doubt. In 1848, Mexico signed a treaty with the US that ceded California and Oregon, along with much else, to the US. Earlier in 1846, when the harsh words were finished and the paper stopped flying and dust settled, the 49th parallel became the boundary between the United States and Britain, with Vancouver Island remaining wholly within the British territories, despite much of it being south of the 49th. Riverbend, in fact, pretty much sits on the 49th parallel. Throughout this period, the inhabitants of Riverbend must have been aware of the opportunities and perils of contact and trade with Europeans, disease, weapons, risky sealing voyages, the threat that other nations had acquired more firepower. Perhaps the river itself remained an idyllic, peaceful place. The first Europeans to visit the head of the inlet was in 1857, and it was probably Eddie Banfield, who held some title from Douglas. Note, who was the governor in Victoria at the time. And note N, not M, Banfield. He described the valley as a large tract of beautiful country, alternately plain and woodland, but the woodland is clear of underbush and as such is by far the best tract of country on the island. So there. Later, Horn and a group visited the area from the Nanaimo side by the lake that bears his name today. That was probably in about 1858 or so. When these various reports of the timber potential of the area were forwarded to Douglas and Victoria, the area's fate was forever sealed. To be a hewer of trees, a fisher of fish, and for generations to have a complicated and conflicted relationship with its original inhabitants. The two races passing, but hardly shaking hands, the incomprehensible to each other for the next 150 years. So next month, for those who are here, we will have Douglas, Stamp, and Sprout arriving at the rainforest. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Yeah, that's a perfect tee up for next month's feature because Robert's going to be the feature and he's going to grab a couple of us to be the extra voices. He's got like a play that that we're gonna do as the feature. So for those of you who don't know a little bit of history about the Alberni Valley, you're gonna get it. And I've heard the play before. It's great. You'll enjoy it, I'm sure. So thank you, Robert. All right. We're going to go on to Zoomland now, and Mark Wonneck in Qulicum Beach is going to share a song with us. And I think we had a little sound check earlier, so we should be good, but let's just check and make sure.
You can hear that all right?
Yeah.
All right.
It's a little loud here. Just hang on. Char's going to just turn you down a bit in-house here.
Turn me down.
Yeah, just keep playing a bit there. I think we got it there, Mark. That's good.
All right. Very
All
good.
right. What are you going to share with us tonight?
Yeah, well, I'd like to do this song. This song is it's a story. It's a story song, I guess. I got it from a newspaper in a little town in southern Manitoba called Souris. Anyways, I think it's kind of nice to know that about the song. I'm going in. Charlotte woke into another day. The sun was fighting with the window shade. Bright eyes, smiling face. 6 years old and not a trace of disappointment in the human race. Mom was calling, breakfast waiting, in front of the bathroom mirror, little sister investigating how her tongue worked inside her mouth. She was crazy, Charlotte had no doubt. Jiggity, jaggedy, don't the clouds look raggedy? Oh, Willie, there's plenty here for you and me. Just you wait and see. Sometimes kindness falls like confetti from a confetti tree. Charlotte got out the door, just caught her bus. Mom yelled something about it being no good to rush. Her closest friends, Charlie, Faith, and Gus, were already on board. They have a lot to discuss, like they did every day. It was the reading circle. They were reading Charlotte's Way. The magic of talking animals and understanding what they said. Charlotte wondered where her name came from, and about the word chrysanthemum. In that small silence, just before the teacher started, someone laughed and said, "Your shirt's on backwards, Charlotte." Well, little laughs travel at the speed of light. Sure, sometimes they're beautiful, other times not right. Jiggly, jiggly, don't the clouds are raggedy. Oakley, dokley, there's plenty here for you and me. Just you wait and see. Sometimes kindness falls like confetti from a confetti tree. Charlotte's cheeks burned red. She'd been in a rush out the door. Don't rush, Mom always said. Till then she'd never wanted a day to end. But her cheeks burned with every kind of shade of red. Well, it was Gus who was the first, which was no surprise. Gus always said he could tell when someone was about to cry. He stood and pulled his arms out of his shirt and spun it around. So it was on backwards too, and then he sat back down. Soon, everyone else did too. Everyone. Everyone. Jiggly, jiggly, don't the clouds are raggedy. Oakley, dokley, there's plenty here for you and me. Just you wait and see. Sometimes kindness falls like confetti from a confetti tree. Just you wait and see. Sometimes kindness falls like confetti from a confetti tree. Very good. Thank you.
Beautiful, Mark. I love your narrative songs the best, I think. They're so spellbinding. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Always look forward to that musical interlude in the evening. It's a nice balance off to just the spoken word. It's great. All right. We're going to come on to our feature reader now. And Perry Bulwer is going to come up to the podium here and talk to us a little bit about his manuscript. And I'll tell you a little bit about Perry, other than spending the 20 years in association with the Children of God. He went to school afterwards, went back and became a lawyer, doing a lot of social justice work, and has now since retired and is enjoying doing some writing. And I think you were just recently named the Alumnus of the Year at VIU University. Congratulations.
Well, of the month, not the
Oh,
year.
the month.
I'm not
Okay.
that special. No.
Well, that's still something.
Well, they used to have a print magazine where you could tell stories like that. So they've stopped that and gone to once a month highlighting an alum of the university. So
Yeah. Sweet.
yeah, and, I guess my excerpt here, as I start, doesn't clarify that this starts out here in Port Alberni. I was born
Perry,
here.
we're just going to make sure we got our volume good here. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
you can keep talking, but
All
we're
right.
just
Yeah,
gonna-
yeah. I mean, I was born here, and the cult commune I joined was here, which is really obvious in the first chapter. But what I've done here, and I hope you don't mind. I've got the book. It's actually a real book, but it's a little hard for me to The print is kind of small in the book. My eyes aren't great, so what I've done is mash some excerpts from a few chapters together, and so I could blow up the text and make it easier to read. So, but
I'm just going to check with Zoomland and make sure the volume's good out there.
All right.
Kathleen, is everything sound good out there? Okay. All right.
yeah, so
Perfect.
yeah,
Thank you.
so this is excerpts from the book. um, I guess like me, most of you, if you see a book on a shelf, whether a bookstore or library, and you check it out, is this something I want to read? You look at the cover, you might read the blurbs on the back. And I always read the table of contents because chapter titles can be can make you curious, question, what's this about? So I thought I'd start by just reading my table of contents. So you get an idea, flavor of some of the weird, bizarre, mysterious things that I cover in this book, because there's a lot of strange things that I got involved in the cult. So here we go. Chapter 1, Gotta Serve Somebody. Chapter 2, California Dreamin'. Chapter 3, He's Leaving Home. Chapter 4, Revolution for Jesus. Chapter 5, Indoctrination. Chapter 6, The End Time Prophet. Chapter 7, Fleeing Babylon the Whore. Chapter 8, Revolutionary Sex. Chapter 9, I Felt the Earth Move. That's a double entendre. Chapter 10, Welcome to the Jungle, or The Guest Who Wouldn't Leave. I actually couldn't make up my mind which title was best, so I just kept both of them. Chapter 11, Prodigal Child Returns. Chapter 12, On the Road Again. Chapter 13, Pearls of the Orient. Chapter 14, I Shook Hands with the Butcher of Beijing. And I mean that literally, the premier of China who ordered the tanks into Tiananmen Square and massacred the students. Chapter 15, Mr. Big in Japan. Chapter 16, The Exorcism of Mary. Chapter 17, Heavenly Lunacy. Chapter 18, Should I Stay or Should I Go? Chapter 19, Losing My Religion. Chapter 20, Law and Disorder. Chapter 21, Tragedy of the Chosen One. Chapter 22, Everything is Broken. And there's an epilogue. And some of you might have picked up on the fact that maybe half of those titles are actually song titles. My initial drafts, every chapter was a song title. I then learned that you can't really use lyrics in a book because of copyright issues. It's hard to get, so I had to paraphrase. But there's a lot of musical influences in this story as well. As you'll see when I'll read this opening, the first section of chapter 1. Chapter 1, Gotta Serve Somebody. I believed God was speaking directly to me through the car radio the day I first heard Bob Dylan singing Gotta Serve Somebody. The lyrics surprised me so much I pulled over to the curb to make sure I was hearing them right. I didn't know that Dylan had converted to evangelical Christianity, so he seemed like an odd messenger for that clearly biblical message. Hearing those familiar words reactivated the dormant dogma I had been indoctrinated with. I immediately recalled a Bible verse I memorized 7 years earlier after I dropped out to follow Jesus with the children of God. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Matthew 6:24. It was August 1979, 3 years since I left the group while living in Asia, and 2 since my return home to Canada. Dylan's song sent me right back to the moment I first learned that scripture from a Jesus freak street preacher. As he showed me those words from his pocket Bible, he pointed to the pulp and paper mill in the distance where my father worked, explaining that the factory represented mammon, a biblical term for money, material possessions, and related greediness. I was an impressionable, immature 16-year-old in grade 11, worried about my future and the lack of options the small forest industry mill town held for me. Then that stranger appeared and offered me an alternative way of life. My father, maternal grandfather, and uncles all worked in the logging industry, either in the woods harvesting the trees or in the mills that processed the logs into lumber or paper. Even my mom worked in the plywood mill until she became pregnant with me. So growing up, it seemed to me that there was an unexpressed expectation that I would wear the same working class boots, just like most in my family and community did. As a teen, I dreaded the thought of following my father's footsteps in the factory, becoming merely a cog in the machine. It was not a life I wanted, but I had no guidance from reliable mentors showing me other possibilities. I felt trapped in that town, so when that evangelist offered me a way out of the valley into what I thought would be a life of freedom, I grabbed the chance to escape. Within weeks, I would become a cog of a different sort, but still controlled by the machinations of others. And there I'll just pause. When I say a cog of a different sort, I'm using the acronym COG, referring to the children of God. So I wanted to avoid being a cog in the system, but I became a cog of a different kind. Something you can't catch unless you read the text. So a few weeks before hearing that Dylan song, I came upon two children of God who were passing through town on a proselytizing road trip. I offered them a place to stay for the night, and they turned my mind back to my former life as a disciple of Christ, trying to convince me to return to the flock. Now, listening to Dylan on the radio, I wondered if the song was another divine sign I needed to heed. 3 months later, I was back in the fold. So that's the first part of chapter 1, which is actually an anecdote from the middle of my story. So then the rest of that chapter and chapter 2 is more of my childhood and Catholic indoctrination, etc. And so I'll skip ahead here to a little part of chapter 3, He's Leaving Home. The Beatles song She's Leaving Home in their 1967 album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band depicts the moment a teen runs away from home. Paul McCartney said the song was inspired by a newspaper report about a missing 17-year-old runaway, noting there were many at the time. In North America that year, the Summer of Love influenced tens of thousands of young people to leave home. 3 years later, Joni Mitchell's Edenic call to get ourselves back to the garden in her counterculture anthem Woodstock expressed the essence of the era as idealistic dropouts from an alienating political economic system dreamed of creating a peaceful egalitarian society. From 1967 to 1971, an estimated 500,000 young American dropouts experimented with alternative lifestyles and communities. I then quote a few academic books on this subject of the runaway phenomenon during that period, including how it relates to the Children of God cult. And then I finish. I was coming of age during the cultural and political turmoil of the 1960s. Numerous events in those turbulent times informed the development of my political and social consciousness, including the Vietnam War, political assassinations, police violence against civil rights and anti-war protesters, the Cold War, and threats to the environment. You could almost think that I'm talking about today here, not the 60s. By the time I was a teen, the US had conducted 2 nuclear tests at Emcee, Alaska in 1965 and 1969, and planned to conduct a third, its largest underground test ever. In 1970, activists in Vancouver, trying to prevent that third test, created Greenpeace and held a benefit concert there headlined by Joni Mitchell to raise funds for a protest ship to sail to the testing ground. There were numerous protests against the Alaskan nuclear tests in the following months, including in Port Alberni, where the threat of a tsunami generated by the underground blast was a real, relevant risk. My first political action was participating in that protest march shortly before the bomb was detonated in November 1971. Humanity was facing the existential threats of nuclear war and environmental destruction, while men were landing on the moon and the Beatles saying it's getting better and all you need is love. I didn't know if I should be hopeful or fearful, which added to my adolescent angst. Not only was my childhood ending, it seemed the world's end could be near too. I then go on to describe my first encounters with the children of God here in town. And within 2 months, I quit school, left home and family, and moved in with the children of God. I was only 16 years old. So then chapter 5, indoctrination, I won't read an excerpt from it, but I just want to note that it contains the full text of an Alberni Valley Times article about me joining the cult. It was like a front page and continued on into the inside pages, a big long article, which I tracked down through the Canada Archives in Ottawa on microfilm. They sent me a copy. So I included the whole thing in the book just because it's historical interest. And chapter 6 is called The End Time Prophet, in which I give the whole origin myth of this person called David Berg, who founded the cult, and how that happened. Within 4 years of founding the Children of God, Berg declared that he was personally named in the Bible as the prophet king who would lead God's people in the end time, that his word was God's word, and that Jesus was coming back in 1993. About 6 months, or after 6 months of indoctrination, I believed him. I hadn't learned to think critically about claims like that, and it was even harder to doubt or question them when the information presented to me was supported by the moral authority of the Bible, a holy book I believed was absolutely true, like many do. My indoctrination ensured I didn't doubt the Bible or Berg. Like a good Christian soldier, I was expected to obey dictates. Disagreements were not tolerated. My indoctrination not only denounced doubts, it discouraged independent thinking. A common chant around the Nanaimo boot camp was, when you think, you'll sink, because you stink. I quickly learned to squelch my doubts and bury them in the back of my mind. No longer thinking for myself, but conditioned to groupthink, Berg's end-time prophecies convinced me Jesus was coming back in 1993. That belief kept me committed to his doomsday message. Now I skip all the way up to chapter 17. So there's a ton of information in my cult life in Asia on 2 different occasions. And chapter 17 is titled Heavenly Lunacy. That's a play on words too, which I won't read in this excerpt, but just to give you a sense, Berg actually taught that heaven is inside the moon. That, yes, believe it or not. That was a bit much to take. Anyway, my life in the family by now, the Children of God had changed their name, reorganized at different times, trying to pretend they were no longer this dangerous cult, the Children of God, that they changed, were now the family of love. So it was just shortened to family. My life in the family finally ended in August 1991. Months before that, I had stopped believing in Berg. His revisions of his visions, prophecies, and predictions didn't convince me. They just made me more doubtful that he was a true prophet. I also couldn't reconcile the extreme abuse of Mary, of the chapter, The Exorcism of Mary, the extreme abuse of Mary and other teens I witnessed in Macau, or Martin's suicide, who is a 13-year-old kid, with what was supposed to be the family of love. I had become increasingly resentful of hypocritical leaders living double standards while they manipulated and maltreated people. I was lonely too after my forced divorce from Rochelle and had no one I could confide in. All my doubts came to a head when I returned to Japan in 1991. I was living in Macau and went to Japan. Although members had to write regular reports revealing not just their activities, but their state of mind, I now knew better than to expose my true thoughts and feelings. I kept my inner turmoil to myself, choosing my confessions carefully, like I had done as a child in the Catholic confession booth. However, some of my angst spilled out occasionally in angry outbursts and quarrels over petty things with coworkers. That forbidden behavior was very uncharacteristic of me, so I was as surprised as they were when I did that. I wasn't happy, and it was getting harder to hide behind a smile. Keep sweet is a phrase that cults like to use. You know, no disagreements, just stay sweet, just obey, just follow. One day I suddenly realized what was happening to me. Like most members, I had a portable cassette player for listening to family music. Mine, which I purchased in Hong Kong, also had a radio. Most worldly music was forbidden to us, so at first I self-censored and only listened to the radio for news reports. But now I began to covertly listen to pop music on an American Forces Network radio station while I walked around the cult compound for exercise. I placed a family music cassette in the player to conceal what I was listening to in case anyone asked. It wasn't unusual for me to interpret a song's lyrics as a divine message directly applicable to my own life. That's what happened in 1979 after I first heard Dylan's song, which prompted me to return to serving God in the family. Now, another rock song stopped me in my tracks, just like that one did, only it led me in the opposite direction. When I heard Losing My Religion by REM, I finally realized that's what was happening to me. Chapter 21, Tragedy of the Chosen One. 13 years after leaving the family in 1991, so this would be 2004, I finally began to dig up my buried past and examine the skeleton in my closet. Discovering the whole awful truth behind the lie I had lived so many years was self-shattering. Unlike losing my religion, which relieved me of dogma-induced existential anxiety and set my mind free, this examination left me feeling shackled with shame as I read shocking, heartbreaking accounts of child abuse on 3 survivor websites. Having discarded my religious blinders, it disturbed me to now see things from the perspective of people raised in the group. Re-evaluating family life from a child's point of view made me realize that what they had experienced was not a righteous life, but was in fact systemic, institutionalized child abuse. Most children in the family suffered more than one of the following forms of abuse: religious indoctrination that denied them freedom of thought and freedom of religion, which includes the right to be free from religion; isolation from society, separation from parents, siblings, and other relatives; educational neglect and intellectual abuse; medical neglect; child labor and financial exploitation; sexual coercion, exploitation, assault, and rape; cruel corporal punishment and extreme physical abuse; emotional and psychological abuse; and spiritual abuse and threats. The experiences of those born and raised in the family were far worse than mine. They were never members since they had no choice. They were conscripts, child soldiers, forced to fight their paranoid parents' sham spiritual war. Exploited and trapped in the only life and worldview they had ever known added a completely different dimension to the abuses they suffered. And when they managed to escape that life, they faced obstacles I didn't have. As I awakened to the fact that the family had harmed a generation of children and continued to do so, I was determined to understand how I ended up in a harmful cult. Why did it take me so long to recognize the abuse I saw and experienced? Why was it so difficult to leave? What specific effects did that life have on me? I had many more questions, so started reading academic books and articles on the subject. The first, Cults in Our Midst, a comprehensive study of a variety of harmful high-demand groups, provided many helpful insights. Although that book has only 2 brief references to the children of God, I recognized elements of my own story on almost every page. After comparing my personal experiences in the family to the various characteristics associated with joining, living in, and leaving cults, I could see very clearly exactly how I was indoctrinated, manipulated, and exploited. I was beginning to understand some of the psychological processes that kept me ignorant and blind to so much of the abuse, and why I didn't recognize it for what it was until I saw in person Mary's torture, which shocked me out of my stupor and prompted me to leave the family. The final chapter in that book, Recovery, Coming Out of the Pseudo-Personality, was especially helpful for understanding the difficulties I had recovering from my life in the family. My thoughts, behaviors, and experiences after I left finally began to make sense to me. Many survivors of various kinds of cults suffer similar symptoms I did after leaving their abusive environments, such as using cover stories to hide my past from everyone, which I did for well over a decade, difficulty adjusting socially, feeling like an outsider in every situation, staying emotionally detached and distrusting of people, inability to form deep friendships and intimate relationships, long-term intentional celibacy, troubled by thoughts and memories of my cult life, and health problems, including migraines, anxiety, depression, insomnia, and chronic pain. After I was diagnosed with PTSD and fibromyalgia, I was continuing to learn shocking things about the family. I was particularly distressed hearing about numerous suicides of people I had lived with or knew of through family publications. Sadly, similar tragedies were still occurring, which was in 2005, still happening. Within the last month, there's been 2 suicides of people who grew up in this cult.
Perry, I want to leave us some time for.
Okay, I got just one more sentence here.
Go for it.
So I was learning all these suicides. In January 2005, a murder-suicide made headlines around the world. The horrific tragedy made a mockery of the family's claim that they had the ideal environment for raising children. So in the final chapter, I discuss more of these consequences on my life and the work I've been doing as an advocate for the 2nd and 3rd generations, people who are born and raised in the group, especially taking on academic scholars of religion and sociology many of who have defended the cult in the name of religious freedom and ignoring the survivor stories as exaggerated or lies. And then in the epilogue, I discuss the current situation with the cult, its downfall, which leaders themselves admit was a result of the survivors, the 2nd generation survivors, exposing all the crimes and abuses on websites. It's made it impossible for the cult to continue like it was. It's like a former shadow of itself. It's an online group now, but anyway. And then I wrap it up by pointing out the similarities to the 60s today. All the conditions I described earlier in the 60s that sort of led me into a cult, they exist today, only even worse. And there's more cults than ever. There's like 30,000 cults or something in the world today. So that's kind of an overview. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, beautiful, Perry. You did a really good job of summarizing the whole book from cover to cover and giving us a good taste of what's in there. So I'm going to just throw it out there. Questions that people have, and one of my questions was going to be, what's the state of the cult now? But you answered that one already. So if anyone out there in Zoom land has a question, you can just pipe up, just unmute, Or anyone here, just throw your hand up. Okay, Robert, and then we'll get you.
Perry, when you talk to others who were volunteers, most people, was there any commonality between your experience and your Catholic upbringing and the reasons that others got into it?
So I'll just let the Zoom people know what that question was in case they couldn't hear that. He's just asking about the commonality that Perry may have uncovered when he talked to other survivors with his experience.
Yeah, there is there are a lot of similarities between like in the cult. We got to calling the people who joined it, like me, the first generation. That terminology is kind of carried over now in discussions of other cults. I was 16. That was on the young side of people who joined. A lot were older teens or in the early 20s. Many had university educations, so they had different experiences. In terms of Catholicism, that's interesting. There were quite a few. I know there's a survivor about my age and who's American living in Japan. Her story is very similar. She was raised in the Catholic Church. Yeah, I think a lot of it was just this kind of searching for something better, and I should say that the cult back then was very, very different. It was almost like a conservative Christianity. There was no sex was like forbidden. You couldn't even date. There was it was a very, and that all changed, of course, because the leaders behind the scenes had their own ideas. But David Berg, the cult leader, basically groomed everybody. He was a sexual predator himself. I mean, I know this from hindsight. At the time, you're stuck in it. You don't know it. And if anybody had told me, I would have rejected them. Like you can't be talked out of a cult. You've got to come to it yourself. But yeah, there's a lot of similarities in the first generation, but then people kept joining into the 70s and 80s, and those people that joined knew way more about the cult because its sexual doctrines were now more open. So it's very hard to talk about this group. It's got a 50-year history because there's so many changes, and it depended where you were in the world. Like this is an ongoing dispute in some private survivor groups. People will tell their story and other people will go, well, that didn't happen in the country I lived in. It depended how close you were to top leadership, and I got very close. I referred to my forced divorce. That was because David Berg himself recruited her into his staff, and we had to be divorced. Now, I was really close to top leadership, so I suffered and witnessed a lot of abuse that people further on the edges wouldn't have. It's very hard to talk about this group as some homogenous thing, right?
I'm sure. Joyce, I think you were next, and then we'll come over here to Judith.
Yes.
So sorry, Joyce is asking Perry how Perry's family reacted to him joining the cult, etc. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking to them, and it happened very quickly. Soon after meeting them, I was going to their commune was on River Road, on the reserve there, and I was going every night after school. I'd spend all my time, and they were getting worried. One day I got called out of class. I was going to ADSS, grade 11. I was called to the office and told my parents were outside in the car. They asked, so my mother raised me as a Catholic. My father never went to church, but he never talked about religion. I have no idea what he even believed. But she wanted me to go speak to the priest about my involvement. And he was supposed to basically talk me out of this. He ended up encouraging me. I was telling him about this group because, remember, again, I mentioned at the beginning, this group was kind of almost just like sort of a side group of a regular church, right? I mean, it was like the Jesus people thing where it wasn't radical so much. I mean, they did drop out and live communally, but their teachings were basic. The priest got quite excited about what I was telling him. He said, oh, because he was a Franciscan priest, you know, St. Francis, you know, the flower child saint, you know, and he just told me, well, don't do anything sudden. But of course I did. Within a week, I left home. But he's quoted in the Alberni Valley Times article. And at the beginning of that article, it opens, I handmade a Mother's Day card. All of us made a Mother's Day card. The Alberni Valley Times printed that at the beginning of the article, and they had interviewed my mother. They, the first night I went to the commune to stay, they were freaked out because I was 16, and they knew from other places in the States that parents had just caused all kinds of trouble for them, going to the police, you know, because they're stealing kids, and so they were worried, and they said, we got to get your parents' permission. They drove me home to get my parents' permission, and my dad was fuming, and I'm not giving no permission. I'm not going to go to the police. I'm so ashamed. I don't want nobody to know. And then 2 weeks later, it's in the front page of the paper, right? But yeah, so they knew what they did was smart. They maintained friendly relations with us to keep. They didn't want to lose me totally, because if they had turned angry and enemies, I would have been gone. I would have been disappeared, which is the normal thing that other communes did. If there was any kind of threat or what they call persecution, they would just hide members and send them off. So yeah, my parents knew about it. I mean, it's a heartbreaking story. I get into, you know, I mean, I basically broke up our family with this idealistic, you know, they claimed in the article they don't break up families, but they taught us to break up families. I mean, it was straight out of the Bible. They would show us verses like, you know, unless you hate your mother and father, you can't be my disciple. That kind of stuff. So yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I try to keep it short. I'm sorry. It's like,
I think we are going to have to call it there for now.
I can hang around at the
Yeah,
end if
afterwards.
anybody wants to ask, because I have a hard time keeping things short on this story.
Yeah,
I could talk for hours straight,
I'm sure.
nonstop. So
Yeah,
I'll hang around if anybody.
that'll be
wants to
great, and
talk
we'll
after.
maybe let the Zoom people ask just at the very end if there's
Oh,
anything.
okay.
And
Yeah.
We'll
Sure.
see how time goes. Thank you so much, Perry.
Okay.
That was really interesting. And I'll just throw in my 2 cents. What I appreciate about your book, I mean, your academic background comes through, and everything is documented so well and referenced and really well organized and so clearly articulated. It's a pleasure to read. And Perry's book is available at Mobius Books here in Port Alberni, also on Amazon for those, and from your publisher as well, I believe. But we'll put that in the chat. Okay. Thank you. All right. We're gonna move on then, and whatever where are we going? We're going to Jennifer in London, Ontario. Online Jen, going to share some more of her beautiful poetry with us.
Thank you. Evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Going back to the book here, it's a great deal if you don't have it. I'll put my website up. I thought I would do 3 bird poems, 3 of the ones from the section in the book called Avian Odes. The first one is called Great Horned Owl. Heard the commotion one sunny afternoon, saw you, huge and magnificent, alighting high up in an oak, persecuted by a coven of angry, fearful crows. You retreated to Warbler Woods and waited. Called by preoccupations large and small, I never followed until, years later, Marcus's canine soul craved walks and woods hikes and pulled me out into the green realm of trees and owls. One evening, tarrying too long, dusk lay heavy, my sight failing, but Trust in Marcus's instincts held firm, and we forged on, racing dark, when came your haunting song floating through the leaves, heard for the first time, but not the last. Welcome to you who venture here. Welcome to my time. Welcome at last to my domain. That's a true story, by the way. It really was. And dogs are great. It was like it was broad daylight. I mean, he was probably following his nose, and he knew exactly where the path was, but I'd lost it. The second one is called American Robin. Treasured spring portent with your sunrise emblazoned breast, nesting above the security light, sky blue eggs bursting into hungry mouths. I envy you. I envy your joy in everything. Dash, pause, dash about the yard, listening for juicy worms, yanking out victims to fill those eager little beaks. Labor's done, summer afternoons, splashing happily in the bird bath. Cheerily, cheer up, cheerily, cheer up, caroling dusk and early morning, chanting for life-giving rain. Cheerily, cheer up, cheerily, cheer up, you urge. Sing it to me again, sing it to me tomorrow. And the third one, thank you. The third one is Morning Dove, and of course that's Mourning, named after its haunting call. Blue jays and such blast into the feeder, scattering skittish customers, but not you. Raptors circle, sending others for cover, but not you. An objectively stupid bird, some will say, zero survival instincts, prolific breeders, but not much more. I prefer unperturbable, untroubled, placid, peaceful, fatalistic. Colors rather bland, they sniff, but look closer at the subtle palette of grays and beiges with a whisper of pink. And no one can deny your mastery of sound, the thrum in flight, and above all, the plaintive call, spring and summer, soliciting a mate. A joyous time, one might think, but the unforgettable pleading tones seemingly infused with fathomless melancholy. Maybe a way of evoking empathy, maybe a moan of dejection at still being alone, maybe a deep sadness and recognition of time passing, but the pensive heart resonates with profound sympathy. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Especially love the Morning Dove poem. That was really profound. Where I used to live, we had several of them that were just constantly kind of a background to your day. It's amazing.
That's right. They'll be out there and they just park themselves somewhere and sit contentedly.
Yeah. Carry on. Yeah.
Start singing when dusk falls.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. So just a reminder that Jen's book is available from her and on Amazon as well. And we'll make sure that's up in the chat too.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I don't believe Paul's here. No. And so we're going to skip Paul and we're going back online here. Peter Paul Van Camp is out there on Denmen Island, waiting to share some more of his, maybe some more of his cycling verse. We'll see.
Well, I'll tell you what, Derek, I finished the series. I've written 72 of the 70 poems that I meant to write, and I'll close with one of those. But first, I'm beginning a new series. This is called Disclaimers of 2024, and the topic of this series, if it becomes a series, it's early to say, is to try to debunk some of the misconceptions that have arisen about myself, my early life, my upbringing, which took place in the town of Coshocton, Coshocton, in Ohio. And Coshocton is situated at the confluence of three rivers. The Walhonding and the Tuscarawas merge there, and they go on under the name of the Muskingum River. And I mention this because it features in the refrain. So let's get right down to this. This one's called, well, let's get a few things straight. There's been a mistake. A mistake has been made. For if he'd been a boy soprano, as an early biographer claims, then the soloist perch at St. Monica's Church was the first place he'd stood up to sing from, where the Walhonding and Tuscarawas come together to form the Muskingum, which they do, but the rest isn't true. No, he sang in his room in a boyish falsetto, and his song was On Top of Spaghetti. Oh, and another falsehood that's been making the rounds has to do with the rhyming know-how that he found. He was walloped, some whisper, by lightning. And that there's where he got that thing from, where the Walhonding and Tuscarawas come together to form the Muskingum, which they do. That part is quite true. But the lightning, that's misinformation. What really occurred is, well, he'd noticed some words had a nice ricochet, which was lacking when heard in their everyday implementation. He found ways to bang them together. And that there was all there was to it. One more misleading myth, which we should lay to rest, is the one that maintains he'd morosely confessed to a magazine writer who quoted him saying that when he left home he had felt all unhinged, like a king who'd abandoned his kingdom, where the Walhonding and Tuscarawas come together to form the Muskingum, which they certainly do, as map study will show. But that castle stuff, someone or other made up. The truth is, he got going because he could no more deny he had more fish to fry than Coshocton's cold skillets could ever saute. He'll tell you the same to this day. So, no boy soprano, no lightning or strike, and as for toting his suitcase back south, where the Walhonding and Tuscarawas come together to form the Muskingum, no matter how willing or winsome, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't ever induce him to live there again. And friend, you have that from the horse's mouth. Now, I don't mean to disparage my hometown. If you go to Coshocton, it speaks for itself. But as I say, there will be more on this topic having to do with other things that have happened over the last 52 years or so, I guess. I'd like to leave you now quickly with Peter Paul Van Camp, On a Bicycle at 70. And this is number 63 of the 72. There's a saying about riding an old bicycle gracefully. Or maybe it was wearing old shoes gracefully. I can't quite remember how the whole of it goes, but heard it quoted once while the radio was playing. It went something like, if you have an old bike or an old pair of shoes and can pedal it gracefully or wear your loafers that way, then something else, and you will have one less care, my friend. Of course, that's not verbatim, but it's more or less the gist. Not exactly words to live by, but you get the kernel of it. An old bike, or old shoes, or a bike instead of shoes, or the other way around. Just be graceful how you go. Something like that. An old timer might know.
All right.
Well, that's me.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Derek.
As graceful as ever. You're going to go very gracefully, I'm sure. And by the start of that poem from your collection for 2024, it's going to be a good year. We're looking.
Oh, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, man. All right, we're coming back in-house now, and we've got a spotlight reader tonight. Judith Reeves is going to share. We're going to have a 10-minute spotlight coming up from the back. Here we go. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll let you, and we'll adjust to
Well,
your preferences.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. Thanks so much. So in order to understand these poems, sometimes you have to talk about them, but that'll cut into my time, so I'm not going to do that. I learned my lesson last time. This is called The Scent of the Sea. In Labrador, there are no soft breezes, breezes that lift your hair playfully, breezes that caress your face. The wind in the Labrador is difficult. The wind blows hard against your legs. Unrelenting and troublesome, you're glad of warm socks, even in the summer. You and the scrub spruce and the spindly birches hold fast to the soil. This is a wind that doesn't care who stands in its way. This wind blows down from the Arctic and across the great ocean, carrying salt spray from the frozen world. This wind blew over ice, over polar bears and ptarmigan and fox. This wind carries the memory of isolation, of bitter cold, of loneliness. This wind either blows like hell or there is no wind at all. No wind to keep the black hordes at bay, the black flies that swarm over your flesh like a black felt carpet. No wind to drive away the hovering, humming mosquitoes that make your day a misery, insects that surround your every move, burrowing into the crevices in your cuffs and collar and littering your eyelashes so that you crave for the bold wind to sweep off the cold Atlantic and bring with it a nip of ice. Even in the summer, you know, if you will freeze or bake or sweat or shiver, except on the sea, where the wind on your face is constant and alive, the smell of the green water whips your nose and slaps your hand on the rail. You must wear hat and gloves and waterproof gear for those who would fall in that water speeding by your hand. The ocean hints at its frigid numbing. The Arctic thaw lurks just below the first 2 inches. As you speed along, mesmerized by the streaming wake, the ocean is waiting to remind you that with the first turgid wave over the side of your boat, it will soak you in seconds. Leaving a skein of salt on your lips, it will snap you awake like you've never been awake, lull you into a false brotherhood, and at the first chance, take you. The ocean is the giant, and you are the pea. A little bit of a change. This is called On the Ward. I'm going to just take this off because I'm kind of struggling with the whole thing. His last days on earth were spent in the reclined position. Did he know us? Did he know we were there? His mind could alight on nothing. His eyes flitted from face to face but never landed. He occasionally muttered and gestured with his hands, but we were none the wiser. I imagined his fragmented thoughts roaming in a morphine freedom. I wondered what pile of dirt he was talking about. I supposed his inner landscape was more interesting than this hospital ward. In the ward, a drugged quiet had overtaken everybody. Even the visitors were hushed and muted, everyone but me. I was telling Joe a story about my own yard. We were both gardeners and always concerned about the outside more than the inside. I said I had a hell of a pile of leaves in my backyard, a gift from my neighbor's trees. We both hooted until a look from his wife shushed me. I couldn't help wonder why. I mean, he could die tomorrow, in any case would die soon. He would die as soon as his failing liver failed. It was already fussy after years of Pilsner, and the cancer had been the last straw. Now he was so sick they had brought him here to the palliative ward. The walls were painted an ugly beige, a color I've always hated. It contrasted badly with his yellow bed jacket. The overall effect was unpleasant. The worn bed jacket looked ghastly next to his own yellowing skin, which in the fullness of his life had always been, even in the dead of winter, a rich chocolate brown. My aunt arched her eyebrows at me at another of his incomprehensible pronouncements. Yep, yep, he muttered to himself. Yep, yep, that's right, he said again. I made a silly, at least he's not in any pain remark, a remark that people make in hospitals when they don't know what to say. Another arched eyebrow. But I suppose none of us would do any better when the time came. I mean, what was polite conversation to him? He was dying, and soon it would all be over. Was polite conversation something he needed? I suppose not. But the eyebrow tamed me, and I lowered my voice, talking in that restrained way of my auntie's, mindful of her suffering, chastised into talking to her, not him, the way people do in the ward. This is called The Secret. Nobody told you how impossible tiny fingernails can be. Nobody told you that sleep is better than sex. Nobody told you your hair would turn gray and your hands would chap and roughen and your waist expand. And even if you'd been told, you wouldn't have been prepared. There is no preparation for motherhood, no course you could take, like how to whip up a perfect meringue or how to change the air filter in your car. Motherhood is a secret no one can break into until you become one. And then there's no turning back, no undoing. You discover that love is a flood every time a baby cries or falters or laughs. You thought you knew what love was. You thought you knew until you were caught watching your child breathing in their sleep in the dark. And you pray even as if you've never prayed before that all will be all right. But even now you know this is false, that life is not fair. But you thought you knew about humility. You thought you knew until you see a mother holding her child in the cancer ward. Or you see the flowers at the side of the road, or your own children lays broken, or they lose the final football game, or they are passed over for the birthday invitation, the spot on the team, the good grade. Now you know the sleepless nights of your own mother, the lines on her face that she brought with her laughter, the veins on her legs that carried you forward, the hands that brushed your hair and taught you how to hold a pencil and clothed you, fed you, slapped you, held you, and kept you safe. You will learn the secret of all mothers all over this planet, the secret they carry wherever, however they live, the secret that mothers are the sun, a bright, comforting sun that shines every day for their children. Mothers are so often forgotten and taken for granted until they are gone. And that is the secret. The sun is your mother, the center of the world. This is a place in Nova Scotia. I've lived pretty well all over the world, but I live in Newfoundland in the summer and I live in Port Alberni in the winter. And I used to live in Nova Scotia, so if anybody knows where Martin's River is, this is Martin's River. Right up to the shore, the fog drifts in and covers the bay. A gray snow that muffles and dampens the air. Everyday sounds are mute, a dog barking, the slap of seawater, a gull's cry. Thick fog surrounds the rocks and pebbles that pave the shore. The water is calm and crystal clear. I can see seaweed and clamshells and barnacles on the stones. 2 feet out, I see nothing. Fog has shrouded the world like a funeral. Far off, I hear the foghorn blow, a sound so mournful, I close my eyes. You can stand on this same shore, and it can be 100 years ago, before this world began, before the highway and the summer houses and the RRSPs and higher education. Clothed in stockings and bonnets and dressed to your toes, the same wavelets slap at your feet, and you might wonder if the men will need or heed the foghorn and be home for supper, lost without a compass, never return. dead reckoning and damn good luck might bring them all home 100 years ago. One more?
Thank you very much, Judith. Actually, that's going to do it. We're got like
That's
10
good.
seconds left. That's good. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you so much.
That was wonderful. Always love to take a journey to the Maritimes. Feel the elements there. I'll never forget being there in 1967, and we went to an outport, and there were still codfish at that time, and the cod were drying on the drying racks, and they were just black with flies. So that line brought it right back for me. Thank you. Alrighty, we're going to go back into Zoom land now, and David Kippling is going to take over the screen there from Kathlleen. And
Oh, there I am.
good evening, David.
Okay, can you hear me?
Sure can. Loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, my habit has been has always been to feed people with stories out there. So you're out there, and here's a story about out there, and I've run out of stories, so this is personal. So I'm very uncomfortable about it. I don't know who Doran Langberg is, but in 2023, Doran Langberg said, when people are gazing into space or napping, that's when they are most themselves. Memories seep up from the underlife, one that's there, available, untapped, persistent, and which surfaces whole and lamp-lit, physical and thick with meaning, is the memory of my dad resting. At home and on our sparse holidays, he worked 7 days a week. He was a master of rest, a glutton, a gourmet of rest, and yet perhaps not so much deliberate as passive, like a patient undergoing healing. I don't know if it was born in him or if life had pressed the necessary lesson on him, the practice and habit of rest. His armchair, his, not anyone else's, was for 25 minutes exactly after lunch each day a cradle of sleep for him. Only years later did I understand how much he had needed those 25 minutes of sleep. He went out like a light, a cliche he daily made true. After 25 minutes, Mum carried in his cup of tea, rattling it lightly on its saucer rather than speaking to rouse him. My father would start and snort and look around and with a smile mutter his own cliche. Oh dear, I must have dropped off for a minute. He said the same words every day for 40 years and more. He slurped his tea, greedily emptying the cup, not delaying, then stood up, adjusted his braces, farted gently, and said as though surprised, oh, I am sorry. Then he stumped stiffly, though then I never knew how stiffly, out to the cold hallway where his tired boots and hat and jacket and the afternoon's work waited inescapably for him. I rarely tried sitting in his armchair. It was fat and wide and did not know my shape, and besides, it was his territory. My mum had her own armchair in matching upholstery, but a lady's chair, she would say. The cats, however, enjoyed Dad's chair day and night and would sometimes join him during his daily midday oblivion. For 2 weeks in the year, the thin annual holiday he was granted throughout his years of service, he could sit or lie back in a deck chair and look, and nap and look again, taking in hungrily the unchanging view of sea and cliffs. He might move his head minutely to follow the human parade. His gaze was deep, almost interrogating, from under thick eyebrows. He would remain there contentedly, resting all day unless urged on an outing or a walk. On some warm summer Sundays, Dad took the unusual step of resting out of doors in the garden. Out of doors. He was not an outdoors person in the common way of thinking. Yes, he worked on a farm, outside, in the fields, and among the animals every day of his life. But that was his job, his work, his profession. But because of that continual, unprotected engagement with land and sky, especially on dark or cold days, he would come home from work, shut the back door very firmly, and urge us to shut those bloody curtains, I don't want to see it. but on those rare sunny Sundays, in the years after they had bought a swing set, when he had a few hours to himself in the afternoon, Dad would sit and rock and feast his eyes on the hedges and trees and sky, and when finally assured that all was well, he would lie on his side and sleep. It was for me an alarming sight. I almost never saw my father lying down. I never saw him in bed, ever. He was up by 4:30 in the morning and often to bed before me. But on that swing set, when he lay down on his side, he turned straight away into a corpse or a wounded hospital patient, so slack, so weak, barely breathing, the lines and shade of exhaustion everywhere on him. The swing set had been a luxury purchase for my parents, and for him I think it was a miracle of privileged comfort, and the flowered canvas top and its fringe perhaps comforted him when he gazed upwards. It was in his garden, hedged around, a leafy green boundary that kept at bay his work, which surrounded the house on all four sides, nibbling and demanding. I last saw my dad resting, lying down unusually straight and formal in his coffin. He wore a houndstooth tweed jacket, a smart shirt with collar and tie, his wiry hair as greased and brushed as savagely as in life. But he had been made up. Somebody, after life had left him, had performed unsolicited make-believe touches while he slept forever, had gifted him plump, rosy cheeks and a clear, buffed forehead that I had never seen before. Never mind, I'd brought him an envelope with apple blossoms from my own garden for him to keep. An acquaintance once demonstrated a pack of tarot cards for me. Invited, I drew the 3 of Wands and stared at it, while I listened to the meanings ascribed to the stooping and cloaked figure that held on to one of 3 tall wooden wands stuck into the earth. I knew already that to me they were staffs, walkers' staffs, perhaps shepherd's crooks. I heard the arcane interpretations, but none of them made sense to me. There was a man holding on, resting, leaning his full weight gratefully onto that staff and looking hungrily into the distance. He was resting. It was my card, without a doubt, because I have inherited, by observation or by genetics, my father's relation to life. Work and rest, work and rest, work and rest.
Yeah. Thank you. What a beautiful portrait. Thank you, David. That was marvelous. All right, we're going to come back in-house now, and we've got another Ned story on the horizon. Dean Lamont is going to take the podium. We're guessing you want to stand, Dean? You want to stand? Yep, all right. We'll whisk away the stool and bring back the podium for you. There we go. We're keeping you busy tonight, Kyle. It's good to see. Yeah, 3 cheers for Kyle. Thank you, Kyle.
All right. Thank you. A lot of good readings tonight. I'm quite enjoying them. This one's called Fire. Fire! Ned sat at his kitchen window staring outside at the new snow being washed away by the rain. It was good to know that the ground was getting soaked deeply, and that the I can hardly read with the light, and the snowpack on the mountains was thickening on the high alpine slopes. Closer to home, his trees were getting a good drenching, and his rain barrels were getting filled yet again. It was hard to imagine now, Ned thought, but soon the rains would depart like some unfaithful lover, and the heat begin again. Port Alberni would switch from being God's urinal to becoming Vancouver Island's hotspot. Ned considered the past few summers. Yes, it was great to go get your jollies out kayaking, sailing, hiking, and biking, But against the backdrop of his dying cedar hedge, the very real threat of his house burning up, last summer, almost no rain for close to 6 months. Hard to believe, but it was true. After getting peed on for 6 months, Port Alberni had got cooked for 6 months. May, June, July, August, September, even part of October. And then there was the road closure. Ned and his senior cohorts generally didn't suffer too much, having been put out to pasture for the most part. But younger working people and businesses suffered huge losses. Fire! The enemy is at the gates. Suck it up. The rain and the snow, princess. It'll likely be a long and thirsty summer. NIMBYists had better keep an eye on their evergreens, like little torches they were, once dried out and touched by fire. And those gutter downspouts, Mr. and Mr. NIMBY, have you ever thought that you could use all that water, happily gurgling down into your perimeter drains? 15 years ago, Ned had countered his flooding crawl space under his house by diverting the downspouts so the water ran away from his house. Ha ha! And now he could double dip and use that runoff to soak down his slopes and hedges. Tra-la! Simplicity, thy name is Ned, he consoled himself, congratulated him, stepping outside to admire his drains. Ah, the gentle sound of downspouts gurgling faintly, the sound of rain barrels filling up, the downslope downspouts emptying onto his hedges, still damaged by past year's droughts. Going back into the house, he saw the ubiquitous Amazon van patrolling the neighborhood. The new global economy it was to keep global warming company. Ned felt a twinge of guilt when he mentally tallied up his Amazon purchases the past year. A few pills, a few clothes, some outdoor gear, straws for his Mason bee condos, etc., etc. He also, luckily for the planet, haunted the local thrift stores, often scoring valuable items for a fraction of the cost. The best score from the past year, Ned thought, was an old drill press and an old chop saw, which enabled him to pump out mason bee houses like sausages. And then there was the old gazebo frame, transmogrified into an outdoor shop. Oh, how it thrilled Ned's little Scottish heart to reuse and repurpose things that might otherwise end up in the dump. Aha, break in the weather. The unfamiliar sun was almost making an appearance. Ned squirted out the back door, compost buckets in hand. Best check out those worms, he thought. With all this rain and warmer temperatures, they'll be having group sex out in the worm bins. Yes, that was the answer, Ned thought. Exposing a handful of glistening, wiggling worms before it's too late. How to learn to live with nature. Having been single the past few years, Ned had found himself cuddling up to nature and meditation for solace. He sometimes imagined that he was one of Gaia's foot servants and that she would grease the wheels, so to speak, if he kept trying to do the right thing by her, as they used to say. It was kind of a shotgun wedding anyway, Ned thought, rinsing out his compost buckets. The planet was dying, or parts of it anyway, and even a little pawn like Ned should be doing his bit to help out. Yes, he knew from bitter experience that working for the environment was often 2 steps forward, 1 back. But the mathematician in him was consoled by the thought that +2 plus -1 still equaled +1. Ring-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Hello? Wake up, Gramps. No, Grandma, it's not Amazon. It's the fire department. Your house is burning down. Thank you.
And you woke us up. Thank you, Teen. All right. Okay, and we're going back out to Zoom land now, and Kathlleen and Gibsons Landing, our moderator of the night, our modest moderator of the night is.
Modest moderator, that's right. Okay. Heather and Harry tossed coins for the next two interviews. Harry won Laura Bannister Esquire, and Heather got the plumber. Little Bloom was to go with Heather, since both parents agreed that a kid could come to less harm being exposed to a plumber than to a lawyer. Laura Bannister was all business, and her silk suit rustled and her stiletto heels clicked as she gave Harry an earful. I'd never sent those flowers to Ruth Gallows. Sure, I liked her, but the moment I slipped and told her about my having been a debutante, I knew it was all over. You're looking surprised, Harry. Do you think Black women can't be debutantes? Not at all, Miss Bannister, but as our partner Heather will tell you, I still get caught out in my sexism. If I look surprised, it was because I was having trouble imagining a debutante becoming a lawyer. I apologize. Please continue. The problem is some people just can't handle other people's success. Ruth couldn't stand my having rich, educated parents, who then made sure I got a good education. To put it bluntly, Ruth is a reverse snob. She wants all Black people to be downtrodden, just like her. But I've gotten used to that, and I didn't hold it against her. I helped her get a caretaking job with my neighbor, didn't I? I just didn't send her flowers. Who sent unwanted flowers to your house, Miss Bannister? Well, it wasn't the plumber. I mean, he didn't do the best job on the taps. He himself admitted he wouldn't give his repairs a 10 out of 10, but I paid him well enough. He just didn't need to send flowers, and certainly not a bouquet of lavender and foxglove. I'm sorry about Mr. McSweeney's demise, but that doesn't refute my case that he was incompetent as a florist. Now, if you don't have any further questions, Mr. Bloom, I have clients waiting. I'm assembling an important land trust for the benefit of all of us, rich and poor, former debutantes, and nobodies. Harry hoped Heather was getting further with interviewing the plumber. At least she had Little Bloom for help and support. Heather and Little Bloom caught the plumber on the work site at a nearby mansion at Paradise Place. If you two don't mind waiting a few minutes, I'll just finish up here, Victor Torres said as he leaned over the pipes and tightened them with a wrench. No worries, Heather answered, as she tried to avoid looking at the plumber's belt line when he bent down. Little Bloom, of course, was staring and grinning. Heather had been in an all-woman comedy troupe. That was a lifetime ago, before she had discovered her true vocation as a detective. Back in the day, she had also been a gourmet cook, a youth worker, and a deckhand on a fishing boat. Her comedy troupe's most popular act had been the Dance of the Sugar Plumber Fairies. They had twirled their plungers like cheerleaders with batons, and then at the climax of the piece, had turned their backs to reveal their oversized jeans sliding down their buttock cheeks, just enough to amuse the audience without getting the show X-rated. Heather regretted it now, making fun of those hard workers. They should have been poking fun at the rich, but the laughs wouldn't have been guaranteed. Rich people didn't expect to be made the butt of jokes the way plumbers did. Victor hiked up his pants as he approached them. Yeah, I remember receiving the flowers. It was about a year ago. Most people don't send a plumber flowers. They were odd, too. Scarlet and nightshade they were. I wanted to know who sent them. You can't be too careful in my line of work, in and out of people's houses. Person could be accused of all sorts. McSweeney said it was an older lady who sent them. But when I called to thank her, she said it wasn't her. Why would Mr. McSweeney lie? Why would the lady? I'm pretty sure I never did a plumbing job for her. Heather saw her chance and she took it. But Mr. Torres, you did do a plumbing job for Laura Bannister. Did you send her flowers? Oh, I fixed her leaky taps. Not my best job. I told her I'd only give it an 8 out of 10. She had a custom-built vanity she had gotten on her travels to Central America. Beautiful, colorful tiles it had. I told her no set of taps and stopper would fit it properly. I did my best, but the basin would never drain completely. She'd always have to wipe up the excess water with a towel. No biggie, I said, and she agreed. Yet you knew she was a lawyer. She might have sued. Yeah, I knew, but I heard she has bigger fish to fry around here. Besides, no one sends flowers to a lawyer. I mean, think about it. That's it for this time.
All right. Okay, thank you, Kathleen, and the plot thickens as we go along. Complicates, I guess. Yeah. I don't know whether Perry would agree that, Perry, have you ever got flowers? She's a lawyer. Never. There you go. You were right on. You called it. Okay. All right, we're going to come back in-house now, and Victoria Roscoe Romanis is going to bless us with some of her writing, poetry or prose. I'm not sure which, but we'll take either. Bit of poetry tonight. All right, sounds good. Uh-huh. We've missed her.
Let's see. I think that's about right. Yeah.
Yes.
Good to see you all again. And yeah, some wonderful writing tonight. Really impressive. Well, it's still February, and my thoughts of getting a collection together was February is the month of love, and it really takes people in many different directions and emotions. So the first one is called The Dance Continues. Can't explain the things you feel. Can't explain what other people do. Feet move in time with the rhythm of life, in sync with the spirit, when without warning, discord causes one to stumble and struggle to maintain balance. You were tricked into believing you knew all the steps. The broken rhythm destroyed the flow. Darkness closes in. The soul becomes battered and bruised, while feet endeavor to find the way to stability. Once more, in step, the dance continues. That's the first one. My amazing seal. Swim over me, my amazing seal. Your strength causes my blood to swirl around and around and around, like the river's current in a whirlpool. Take me up and bring me down. Capture me with your incoming tide. I call out to you to swim over me again and again and again. Oh, I've lost one. Must be attached here somewhere. Oh, why am I shaking so much tonight? I don't know. Anyway. Sorry. Ugh. The next one's called Finishing Touches. I think that was the one. Hands touch. Eyes electrify emotions with energy, igniting deepest passion, two bodies becoming one. Time passes, distances those who loved, strangers now, destroying sanity with war-torn words. The courtroom door opens. The weight of justice tips the scales. One with power to judge makes the finishing touches. What's that mean? And the last one is called The Tavern's Austrian Gypsy. Only a memory now, facial features veiled by time, but the memory of his body lingers, weathered, sunburned skin, the smell of wood smoke on his clothes, strong arms supporting his fiddle, skilled bow racing over the strings, the life, depth, and wildness of his voice. He moved close to her table, looked into her eyes as he sang. He drew her in her desire for him. As he implied he desired her. Come with me, he whispered in her ear during the applause. Danger signals rang in her head, crisscrossed with the enchantment of this earthy, sensual gypsy. To step outside into the night in Austria, a country she had only known for a day, with this tempting stranger? She was young, only 19, but not a fool. Her heart went with him for a while when he left the tavern, and his memory arouses excitement still.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the equation of that, of love energy and the seal, you know, and it was a nice contrast to Dean trying to equate it with the worms and the compost. I think yours worked better, right? Yeah. Thank you. All right. Lisa Charles is in the house here, and I think she's going to share some work with us tonight. Welcome, Lisa. Glad to have you here at the Electric Mermaid. Always good to see some new faces and some new voices and hear some new writing. There we go. And while we're getting set up, Karen Poirier, I'm just going to ask, were you planning to read tonight while I got you on the line there?
I think I'll just be a listener tonight, if that's okay.
All right, good. Just thought I'd check.
Thanks for asking, though.
We sure enjoyed your feature. It was
Thank
nice.
you.
Okay.
So my name's Lisa Charles. I'm a second year Vancouver Island student. Part of my training right now is I need to network. I'm an anthropology student where I was minoring with sciences, but now I want to do more of writing history and changing the history books to the truth. And so now I'm focusing on more of a minor in English or literature. Mm-hmm. I haven't really written anything yet that I want to say yet. I'm still working on my style. I just came to support Perry. This is a poem written by a man that is a third generation survivor of a cult. Mm-hmm. When he reads his poems, you can see a lot of his rage. So this is kind of how he does it. So he says, children's cries, unheard, unseen, in the shadows is where the horrors literally convene. They all flee the crime scene. That is grotesque. Obscene. Riot of vengeance is what justice demands. For the grip of evil, evil's cruel hands. All of the lies laid bare at last. No more deception. The die is cast. Take a look at who is in y'all's literal cast. Criminal exposure is what he says, but I always say TF. What? TF is vast. Oh yeah, at last. Riot of defiance. We are breaking chains. Daddy, whose expense was y'all's so-called gains? Traffickers tremble, parents weep, their sins exposed in the darkness deep. They paid to become the epitome of creep. The crimes against children go deep. Meanwhile, the FBI claims they are just asleep. Time for y'all to get a MF grip. Drip, drip, drip. So much kids' blood, they need a strong AF dosage. They need a whole flood. Riot of unity. The crimes have been committed in perpetuity? I can't say that word. Our voices rise in the recklessness of evil that we are here to defy. He used another acronym here. We DGAF if any of y'all cry. Oh, don't give a fudge. If what y'all did to kids, y'all's favorite area, where everyone can find your hidden lie. For we are against corruption, against deceit. It's children who are not fair game for y'all to eat. F y'all's fake as F, meet and greet. Riot of truth, be piercing the literal night. Please, God, guide us forward towards the sunlight. We need not disinfect. No, 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 Daddy. No more chances for y'all to deflect. It's kids who y'all should have not gotten into the hotel to pay to select. Choose the guilty plea deal. Time. Do you elect? Though wounds may ache and scars may sear, we'll stand together without a shred of fear. For your all's tyrannical era is coming to an MF end. Oh yes, the end is near. Riot of change on the horizon bright. When innocent is protected in the light, kids could not consent. Yet y'all made out our literal plight. Oppressors beware, your time is done. In this scathing riot, justice won. That was the end of that poem. He wrote that about 4 days ago.
Wow. Thank you. Powerful.
Trafficked from Mexico when he was 3 years old. He was actually a third generation, and he was auditing or interrogating rich people that would pay for him to audit in these hotels when he was 12 years old.
Wow.
And he's 39 now, and he's living life to the fullest, and he's great.
Well, good happy ending. Yeah, there's so much coming to light these days, and I think there's so much more to come to light, and we can only hope and pray it does continue to come to light. Put an end to it at one point. All right, we're getting to the end of our list here. Bob, I didn't see you on the list tonight. Were you planning to read and didn't sign up, or? There, I thought you might have something you wanted to share. So Joe Lunchbucket, aka Bob Franco, is going to share some uplifting poetry once again, pose some provocative questions.
How's that? Can you hear my heavy breathing?
Yeah. Good to see you breathing. Okay.
His universe with asteroids and black holes, fine-tuned, or chaos creation and survival is by chance. His Earth with quakes, tsunamis, sunspot activity, droughts, plagues, blood-sucking parasites and viruses, evidence of an omniscient, merciful, loving creator, or proof of evolution. Do we accept Big Bang theory on faith and pray for future enlightenment? Was man created above animals and the chosen above us. What branch are we on evolution tree? Unlike religion, men of science lack faith and evidence pursue. But Michael Behe and Stephen Mayer question if origin of life is something that only God can do. Did Satan rebel against heavenly dictatorship because God declared a two-party democracy was not a feasibility? Are we all God progeny damned by Adam and Eve's apple theft? Do we want to be in heaven with a cruel God that exacts death penalty for working on the Sabbath and demanding that Abraham sacrifice his son? Do human and animal offerings to appease cruel gods overrule logic, common sense, and reason? Does lacking tail mask our body language and allows us to be more deceitful? Did man succumb to capitalist greed while the rest of creation tend to be socialist? Did capitalism's greed propel us to the stars, leaving our DNA chimpkin and tree? Do they lack IQ to grasp God concept? Or does their common sense reject fantasy? Complex revelations, a talking snake and ass, deluge, a man swallowed by a fish, and a virgin birth. Was common language of communication split into many to retard Tower of Babel's progress? Did God drown all creation when only man displeased her? Did culling improve human race? If the Bible is the word of God, dare we critique Canaanite genocide in Numbers 31, 17, and 18? Did slaying men, women, and children, except virgin girls that they kept for themselves, warrant the price of promised land? Did God's wager with Satan cause life loss in Job's family? And did biblical atrocities against humanity exceed Satan's? Did this, believe it or not, good and evil tale that writers begot become a bestseller plot? Bible condoned slavery and blessed 13-year-old Virgin Mary's marriage to 70-year-old carpenter Joseph. Clergy compiled tale into a big volume magazine by order of Roman Emperor Constantine that chose Christ Messiah over Zeus because he preached, slaves, be obedient to thy masters and give unto Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. Was Christianity a guiding light and Rome unite? Did our seas have a monopoly on interpretation until Gutenberg's press brought it to every nation? In vain, Pope burned Bibles, but couldn't regress man's progress. Our religion permitting the sale of daughter, but not son, and specifying the size of stick used to beat wives, misogynist? And do Muslim and Sikh gods exact dress code? That's about it.
Thank you, Bob. Very wide-ranging and provocative as always. Thank you, Bob. All right, I saw Jeremy come in later. There, you still in the back? I can't see back there in the darkness. Jeremy, were you going to read anything tonight, or no? No, that's okay. If I thought if you, I did. No worries. Yeah, that's all right. We'll forgive you. Just next time, or you're barred. That's all. All right. Okay, well, I'll wrap it up. I'll step up to the podium and just give you a short poem to close the night. Oh, Vicky, sorry, we didn't get you. What happened? Sorry. Oh, Yeah, see, that's what happened. Karl didn't show up. We'll blame it on him. And Kathlleen, it's not your fault because Vicky wasn't on the list, okay? It's my fault because I knew Vicky was here and I didn't ask her whether she was going to read or not.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll have to tell Karl about that for sure. I wasn't sure if I was going to come tonight because I couldn't think of anything to read. I don't have anything new to share with you. So I decided to go back in time and I found this, which is 2010, Derek.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, this is the first poem I had published. It's called Ernest and Martha. I bet Hemingway never pickled beets over a sweltering stove, damp cigar clamped between purple-stained fingers as he contemplated the effective use of understatement in modern fiction. I doubt that Ginsberg ever scrubbed a toilet, beard tucked, brush in hand, pondering over porcelain, the evils of conformity, the impact of ragged alignment. I, on the other hand, witness the death of mouth-watering metaphors every day. They drown in the ooze of Martha's favorite cupcake batter. Excuse me. Or throw themselves from columns of checking, savings, and balance due. Oh, for the solitude of a sleazy hotel room, free to explore the lovely long body of the written word, with all its subtleties and surprises, to let hyperbole roll from my tongue, run my fingers over the silken smoothness of immaculate imagery, stroke the swelling rise of story till it becomes a thing of substance, with a life of its own, and finally break away with only Hemingway's concerns. Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Shall I sleep? And this one is a newer one. It's called November Sun. November sun is not like summer sun. It creeps in gentle, elusive, shy as a forest creature. It alights on the wall, watches, stretches, until the whole room is soft around the edges. A place for gentle retrospection, a second cup of tea. I watch it caress the books, the desk, my photograph of you. It lingers on my hand, but there is only the memory of warmth, and then it is gone.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you stood up and caught my attention. And what a powerful debut poem that was that you read. I remember that well. Okay, I'm going to jump up there and finish things off. Thank you, Kyle. All right. Yes. So I don't know how many of you saw Joni Mitchell at the Grammys or watched it afterwards when she did Both Sides. Now, it wasn't that powerful. I was, yeah, it moved me so much. And anyway, this kind of popped out of that. And my apologies to the divine Joni Mitchell. It's called Both Sides now, but anyway, it goes something like this. I modernized it. Scrolls with trolls on Facebook feeds, and hours spent watching kitten reels and TikTok wisdom spouting spiels. I've looked at phones that way, but now they only hurt my thumbs. They waste whole days for everyone. So many things I could have done, but phones got in the way. I've looked at phones from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's phone's distractions I recall. I really don't know phones at all. Memes, live streams, and Instagram reels, the viral scrolling way you feel when all your friends post bistro meals. I've looked at love that way. But now it's just another screen. And you say aloud, it's not my scene. But if you care, don't spill the beans. Don't give yourself away. I've looked at love from both sides now, from gush and porn, and still somehow it's love's illusions that I recall. I really don't know love, really don't know love at all. Boasts and posts of feeling proud to say, hey, look at me, right out loud. Tweets and deletes and funding crowds. I've looked at life that way. Oh, but now old algorithms are acting strange. They email me because they're worried that I've changed. Well, something's blocked, but something's gained from ditching your profile. I've looked at phones from both sides now, from Apple and Droid, from use or lose, and still somehow it's phone's illusions I recall. I really don't know life from my phone at all. It's life's illusions that I recall. I really don't know life. I really don't know life at all. Thank you. And ironically, I left my phone at home tonight. Oh dear. Thank God Char had a spare timer. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming tonight. And it has been another, I think, extraordinary evening of great variety and talent and interest for me anyway. I've enjoyed every minute of it. And so great to have had our feature, Perry Bulwer, sharing his life story in many ways. And I hope people will go out and buy the book and read the whole thing, because it's pretty incredible what he's lived through. And the fact that you took that and then used that to make change afterwards when you got clear, that was beautiful and profound. So thank you, Perry. Thank you for coming. And yeah. And thank you also to Judy, our 10-minute spotlight. That was a wonderful journey to the Maritimes. And I'm so glad that you come out and visit us and go back and forth. Please keep doing that and bringing the Maritimes with you when you come. Thank you, Judy. And of course, thank you as always to Char for keeping us technically online, providing the whole house, providing the sound and everything all at once. I'm always in awe of what you're able to do. And, you know, Dean can't see his page and all of a sudden, miraculously, the light starts to come up. That's Char in the background on her phone going. So we're really grateful. Thank you to Sheila for keeping us fed and watered tonight here at Char's Landing. Yeah. Thank you to everybody out there in Zoom land for your contributions. Wow. Beautiful writing and music, and you add such a depth, richness to the evening here at Char's. We would be feel so bereft if we didn't have you guys there. So I'm really glad you keep coming and fulfilling that role for us. Thank you. Keep it up. And thank you to Kathlleen out there in Gibsons for stepping up and filling the big shoes of Karl there. And I don't know, we might have to tell Karl he's going to have to prove himself next month, but Kathlleen says no. Okay. All right. So thank you all the open micers who came and read, and thank you also to Kyle for keeping the mic in place. That was great. Much appreciated as always. Perry is going to hang around if anybody wants to talk some more with him. And I did say I would throw it out if there was any last minute questions from Zoom land that you wanted to ask Perry. We have a hand.
Oh, David has a question. Go ahead, David.
Hi, if he's listening, it occurs to me that, well, have you ever met, like in the cult, there were some people who were good at it, right? They were good recruiters. They were real true blue members. And I'm just wondering if in the world at large, quite outside it, you bumped into people and you thought, oh, they would be good.
Okay, if I understand you right, yeah, there are many cults take many forms, and there are many groups and organizations. A lot of people wouldn't think right offhand that they're cultic or cult-like, but they have. I mean, there besides charisma, that many cult leaders have this sort of charismatic way of being and attracting people to them. There's also like, sales tactics, so for an example, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it occurs to me, multi-level marketing, scams, that's very cult-like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that the characteristics of like a classic, let's say, religious cult, if you look at the characteristics of those leaders or the recruiters, the ones that are really good at their job at persuading people, like in our cult, nobody worked. We scammed people by saying, give to us so we can help others. And then of course we keep 90% and, that kind of stuff. So those characteristics of cult leaders and cult recruiters, you'll find those in all kinds of people and all kinds of groups, and that's where I said earlier in an earlier discussion here, when somebody asked me what would you think of as the biggest cult, you have to start by defining what you mean by cult. So you find these characters. There's things like coercive control and gaslighting and all these things that you'll find in, for example, domestic abuse cases that apply directly to the cult I was in. I mean, when I was in recovery and trying to figure out what happened and trying to grasp it, I saw myself as a domestic abuse survivor because of the nature we were called a family, God, Father, that kind of thing, so you find those things all through society. So when I sign my book at book signings, I'll put that little quote related to the Jonestown massacre, don't drink the Kool-Aid, or beware of the Kool-Aid, buyer beware, I actually, the very last sentence in my book is urging readers to read my book as a cautionary tale against being misguided by all kinds of people, not just, I don't know if that gets to your.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Karen, I think you've got a question there as well. Go ahead.
Well, I probably missed it somewhere along the way, but what is the title of your book?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I should. I read the table of contents, but not the title. It's the main title is Misguided, and the subtitle is My Jesus Freak Life in a Doomsday Cult. I had maybe a dozen working titles. One of my first ones was Doomsday Cult, and then I discovered there's actually a book called Doomsday Cult. In the subtitle, Jesus Freaks, that's a deliberate nod to what I consider the best book about this cult by an outsider. It's called Jesus Freaks, Murder and Madness on the Evangelical Edge. And that book, when I was reading an excerpt, I ended with this one-liner about a tragedy that made headlines around the world. And it involved a murder-suicide by the cult leader's son. And it relates a lot to the poem that Lisa read, which was filled with revenge. He was used as a poster boy for child abuse in the cult. And once he realized and came of age and realized how he had been used, he wanted to get justice, but justice is, and this is a whole big story, I do talk about it in the book, finding justice for abuse survivors for this cult's been very, very difficult because of aliases that were used, secrecy, moving from country to country. Kids had no idea where they lived or who their abusers were. It's very hard to get justice. So he ended up taking he tried to kill his mother, and ended up killing one of her secretaries who was his nanny. So Jesus Freaks in my subtitle is a nod to the book Jesus Freaks, which tells that story in great detail. I do summarize the story because it was a major factor in bringing down the cult. And it was the second generation, the children born into it, that really played the major role in bringing this cult down. So, yeah. And like I said, I cannot answer a question simply. I'll go on you got to stop me. I'll just keep going on. There's so much to tell. And I actually appreciate, Derek, your comment about, you know, you noticed my academic skills coming through the book, it's an unusual memoir. Most memoirs don't have 400 endnotes. I documented and cited everything, and it's a blend. It's sort of a hybrid memoir of my own personal story mixed with an academic approach to the cult itself, and that whole world of cult studies, religious studies and cult studies, and I take that world on from my own experience. And I appreciate it when people recognize that. And there's a lot of little hidden treasures in the book. I don't know if anybody would pick up on this. The very opening line, I thought God was speaking to me directly through the radio when I heard Bob Dylan. I don't know if anybody catches that cultural reference to God speaking to me through the radio. Anybody get an idea? No, it's from a George Burns movie, Oh God, where George Burns is God, and John Denver, he starts hearing this voice through the car radio, and it's God speak, and John Denver tries to change the channel, and God keeps talking to him. So there's all kinds of little hidden secrets and references in my book all throughout it. So anyway.
Cool. All right. Any more? Well, we'll just if there's no more questions from the Zoom land, we'll close up out there, and we'll just yeah. All right. Thank you, Perry. There's more applause coming from Zoom land for you. All right. We'll see you all next month. Take care. Thanks, man. That was. The meeting, okay. Yeah.